These videos were created for you to watch along. They'll teach you about client track so you know what's going on. So best of luck with all of your data. Now here's your HMIS system administrator.
In this training video, I'll be going over login and basic navigation within ClientTrack. To use ClientTrack, you'll want to open up a web browser. The latest versions of Firefox, Internet Explorer, and Chrome should all work. However, we do recommend Chrome as it seems to work a little bit smoother than the rest of them. You can also pull up ClientTrack through your mobile web browsers, either through your smartphones or your tablets. The web address you'll want to key in is www.clienttrack.net/GAHMIS. Once you key in that, you should get to a screen that looks like this. Your username is always going to be your email address. And then if this is your first time logging into ClientTrack, you should have been given a temporary password from your admin. So you'll want to go ahead and type in that temporary password here and then click sign in. Because that was just a temporary password, it will make you create a brand new password the first time you log in, and this new password must be at least 8 characters, have at least 1 capital letter, 1 number, and 1 non-letter number character. So we'll go ahead and create a brand new password here, and then we'll click change my password. You'll then see these options here. The first one is work group. These two options should be available to you. One is HMIS programs, one is street outreach. If you are trying to do work for a street outreach project, you'll definitely want to be sure that you are logged in as the street outreach work group. Everyone else would want to go logged in as the HMIS programs work group. Work groups determine what options you have available to you within the system. Organization will be the next option here. You should be able to see your organization listed here, and depending on your admin role, you might have the opportunity to select different organizations here. It is important, if you do have the option of multiple organizations, to select the one that's appropriate for the work you're going to be doing. So if you are going to go enroll a client into a specific agency, you want to be logged in as that agency. And that also goes for if you're recording case notes or services, anything to do with a specific agency. Please be sure to be logged in as that agency. Also note, depending on what agency you're logged in as, it also determines the security model of the system. And so, for instance, if you were logged in as one agency or organization, you might not be able to see a client's enrollment within a different organization. So once we select the appropriate organization, we'll want to click on Use these settings. And now if this is the first time you're using ClientTrack, you might not get this pop-up here because your web browser might have a pop-up blocker set up on it and actually block this screen from coming up. So if you don't see this screen and you're still stuck on this screen, I'd recommend looking up here in the top right. You'll probably see a little notification here that pop-up has been blocked, and usually there's an option to allow it, and also sometimes an option, depending on what web browser you have, an option to allow it in the future or to never block ClientTrack pop-ups. And so I definitely recommend using that option. That way going forward you won't ever have to worry about this being blocked. So this is the ClientTrack interface. I'm going to go ahead and maximize this window. The first thing you'll want to do when you first log into ClientTrack is set up what's called your security question. Setting up your security question will allow you in the future to reset your password if you were to forget it. To set up your security question, you'll click on your username, which will be in the top right hand side of the screen. You'll then click on Change Password. You'll then click on I want to update my recovery information. This area would be blank if you have not set this up, and this button would say Set. And when you click on Set, you would then type in a question and then type in an answer to that question and go ahead and click Save. Once you've done that, if you are ever on the login screen here and you forget your password, you can click the Forget Your Password link and use the Retrieve Security Question option. What that will do then is it will ask you that question that you set up, and then as long as you're able to answer that correctly, it will let you reset your password. Now that we've gone through that, we can go ahead and get on to some of the navigational features of ClientTrack. So when you first log in, you are taken to what's called the Home Workspace. And you can tell it's the Home Workspace by looking at the top left here, and you'll see Home. Workspaces kind of function like tabs, and on each tab or workspace, you will have different menu options here, and also different menu groups. So these would be the menu groups, and then these individual things would be the menu options. If there is an arrow on a menu option, that means you can hover over it and it will give you more options, such as these. And to change workspaces, you can click this icon here with the two arrows, and it will show you the available workspaces. And so here we have the home workspace, which we're on now, and this is the client's workspace. You'll note if we switch to the client's workspace, now all of these menu options change. And if this is your first time logging into ClientTrack, this might look a little different here. You might not see all these options, and that's because there's not a current client pulled up. And the reason there's a client pulled up on mine is because this is the last client I had previously pulled up. And so ClientTrack always pulls up the last client that you have pulled up in the system. So we know we can navigate the different workspaces here, and that those are what's going to control the different menu options. And the way I like to think of it is, if you are ever working with an individual client, and that's going to be everything from doing intakes to case notes to services, anything like that, you're going to want to be on the client's workspace. If you're ever doing anything that's not to do with a particular client, but maybe multiple clients at the same time, like running a report or seeing a list of multiple clients that are enrolled in your project, then the Home tab is where you would want to be. So we'll go over a few options here on the Home tab. First off, the kind of landing page when you first log in is the user dashboard, and you can also always get back to the user dashboard by clicking on user dashboard here. What this does is it has what's called the bulletin board up top here. This is where system admins can leave notes here, and so you can see we've got some links to some of the other training videos we have created, and we'll also add some other news items here, so this is always a good thing to keep an eye on. You'll also have an overview of your different projects and how many people are enrolled in them. And then you'll also see a list of any clients you have currently assigned to you. If you click on Recent, that will pull up the last 5 clients that you have pulled up. If you click on My User Configuration, or actually hover over My User Configuration, and then click on My Information, this is where you can update your name, your email, your office phone number. And it is important that this information is correct, because for instance, when you submit an issue, we are able to see what phone number you have listed, and if we need to reach out to you, that's the phone number we'll call. So you definitely want to make sure that information is accurate. If you click on paused operations, you'll see any paused forms or paused workflows. This will make a little bit more sense when you get further into the training videos. Under training documentation, this contains some important documents from DCA in regards to HMIS. If you look on current enrollments, this will give you an option to select one of your projects, and it will list all of the clients that are currently enrolled in that project. Also, some of the options on the home workspace, for instance, will automatically direct you to the client workspace. For instance, these are a list of clients we know are enrolled in this project, and if I were to click on one of these icons, it's going to pull up this client's record, and it's going to automatically take me over to the client's workspace to do that. So if I click here, we'll notice this changed to client, and now in what's called our entity toolbar here, this lists the client's name and some of their information. And regardless of what we're doing on the client's workspace, whether we are doing case notes or services or have a particular form pulled up, is always going to list the client that you are currently working with right here. And if we go back to home, you'll note that this changes. This will be your actual name, and then it will list what organization you are logged in as and what work group you are logged in as. Another option of the navigation in Client Track allows you to add frequently used forms as favorites, and this will allow you to be able to access certain forms quickly. So for instance, if there is a specific report that I find myself running a lot, you'll notice there is a star icon here. If I click on Add to Favorites, and then it would allow me to rename that if I wanted to. I can set up parent folders, so basically there's submenus that these favorites are listed as. Right now I'm just going to do no parent and click Save. You'll note now Clients and Programs is listed up here. So this is a way I can now quickly access that. Same way works for the Client's Workspace. If there is an assessment I do a lot and I want to be able to pull that up, then I could go ahead and go into this, click Add to Favorites, Save, and now I'm going to have this under my favorites here. You can also modify these by right-clicking, hitting Remove, and it'll take that away. Same way on the home workspace. Another feature of the menu, the side menu here, is you'll notice there is a thumbtack right here. If I were to click this, it would allow me to auto hide this menu. This is good if you have a smaller screen and really want to utilize your screen for the work you're doing here instead of these menu options. So if I click on the thumbtack, now when I click over here, it will make the menu disappear. And that will do the same thing on the Clients tab. So you'll see here we have all this space here. If I click over here, it will pull up the full menu. A few other things in closing. If you click your username on the top right here, you can change what work group you are in, as well as if you have access to different organizations, you can change that. You can also change the theme. Some people find a lighter theme easier to see, so if I were to change that and hit apply, it'll brighten it up a little bit. You can reset your password here by clicking change password, put in what you want for your new password, type it in again, and then type in your current password and click change password. That would allow you to do that. Regardless of what workspace you're on, you can use what's called the global search up here to search for forms, reports, and clients. So it's a great way to quickly pull up clients. You can type in their name, hit enter, it'll pull up any possible matches, You can click on that and it will pull up that client. And like I said, that works regardless if you're on the clients or if you're on the home tab or workspace as they call it. And when you click on that client though, then it will go ahead and take you over to the client's workspace. You can also type in partial searches here. It'll pull up anything that matches. So sometimes that'll be faster. Just type in the first two letters of the first name and last name. You can also type in the client ID. Client ID numbers are listed right here. And if you were to type that into the search here, then it would go ahead and pull up the client by that ID. So that's all the basic navigational things within ClientTrack. Hopefully that filled you in on that. And as always, if you have any questions, you can always click the help button here and ask a question, report an issue, or make a suggestion. In this training video, we'll be going over how to do an intake within ClientTrack. Doing an intake is how we initially enroll a client into one of our projects. And so after logging into ClientTrack, we'll want to go ahead and navigate over to the Clients tab. And this next step I'm going to walk us through is actually a very, very important step. Because this is a shared database, there's a good chance that the client you're trying to enroll might already exist within the system. And so we don't want to create a duplicate client record, but instead we want to do a proper search to see if this person exists in the system and then enroll that client record. To search for a client, we want to click on the Find Client icon here in the top left. And the first thing we'd want to search by is Social Security number. Reason why we'd want to search by Social Security number first is, in theory, there should only be one client tied to one Social Security number, and so this would be a quick way to pull up a client. So here, if you were able to see the client you were looking for, and you can verify that by name and birth date as well, you would go ahead and click on that client and it would pull up that record. However, if you do not see the client you are looking for here, we don't want to stop at this step, but we want to search a little further. So the next step we'd want to search by is birth date. But first we would want to delete the Social Security number here. Now the reason we'd want to do that is if I go type in a birth date here and hit search, I might not get any results, but that might be because I'm also now looking at birth date and Social Security number. So a way to kind of think about this is if you're used to doing Google searches, sometimes the more you type in the better because it's going to look at all possible matches. This form, however, is a very specific search, and so it's going to make sure everything here matches on that client record. So the more information you type in on this screen to do a search, then the more things it's going to make sure that client record has to match. So for instance, if I delete the Social Security number here and just search by birth date, we can see there's actually 5 different people that do match this birth date. So again, we want to search by social first. Then if we don't find the person, delete social and just search by birth date. And then of course here, if we see our client, we'd be able to go ahead and click on them. If we still don't see our client, it would be recommended that you do a search by name. Reason we'd want to do this is in case maybe they have been keyed in already, but there was a digit off on the Social Security number, so we could still say, it's the same person, but the person that keyed it in got the Social Security number slightly wrong and maybe the birth date slightly wrong. So you can search here using first name, last name. You can also do partial name searches. So for instance, if there's a name that might have a common misspelling, you can type in part of the name and it will still search by that as well. So here you can see these are possible matches that match what I typed in here on first and last name. And then of course going by Social Security number and birth date will allow you to verify if this in fact is one of the people you were trying to pull up. So once we find our person, we would go ahead and just click on them. Once we've done a proper search for a client and either pulled up that client record or determined that that client does not already exist in the system, we would want to go ahead and click on a project intake button to start the process of doing an actual intake. So you'll note here that there's actually two buttons here. There's one that just says project intake and one that says RHY project data intake. This RHY stands for Runaway Homeless Youth, and this would just be used for a project that is specifically under the RHY grant. Also to note, if you are a street outreach project, you will actually want to navigate to a different work group. So if we click on our name up here in the top right, we can change work groups to street outreach, hit apply, and now you'll note this button turns into street outreach intake. So if you are enrolling someone into a street outreach project, you would want to use that option. Everyone else would want to be under HMIS programs. And then for RHY projects, you would use this intake, but everyone else you want to use the standard project intake. So I'm going to go ahead and click on project intake. Now if we had previously been able to pull up the client that already exists in the system, and we can see that information right here, we would just click on use the current client, and that's going to go ahead and let us enroll that client into our project. This will pull up the information that's already being keyed in for this client and give you an opportunity to edit that before we go on. So if you're on this screen, definitely recommend looking over this information, making sure it's correct. If you notice the birth dates, a day off, or the social security numbers, a digit off, names misspelled, whatever, like you would go ahead and correct that information on here or any of the other client demographics, and then you would go ahead and click finish, and that would go ahead and let you continue the intake process. However, for training, we're going to say that the person that we're trying to key in, we were not able to find them. We were not able to pull them up at all. And so we'd still go ahead and do the same process of project intake, but instead of using the current client option here, we're going to say add a new client. It's still going to walk us through this search existing clients form as just kind of a fail-safe in case this person does exist, but we did not search for them properly. So here we'd go ahead and type in, just typing their first and last name is fine here. And also, when keying in somebody, the name we'd want to use as far as for recording them, not when we're doing that first search under find client, like I said, you can use partial name searches. Here we want to make sure we use their full name, and we also want to make sure this is their legal name. We don't want to use nicknames or anything like that here, because if we do that, it's going to be then hard for the next agency that goes to try to enroll that client. They might use their legal name, and if we've used their nickname, then it's not potentially going to pull up that client. So we always want to use, if everybody uses the legal name, that's going to be the best situation to make sure we don't create duplicate clients in the system. And this process here is just going to walk you through recording all the client demographics for the person. So something to note here is some fields are going to have asterisks, so that means it is required information. So middle name, for instance, is not required, but you can type in the middle name here if that's something that would be helpful for your project or your agency. You can totally do that here. And there's also some fields that auto-populate. So for instance, name quality here, because I typed in a first name and last name, it automatically marked it as full name reported. So we'd want to go ahead and continue to type in information here. Now in all these fields, or a lot of these fields, there will be a quality field here. And so for instance, here is social security number. If I go ahead and type in that social security number in full and then go to the next thing, it's actually going to make that field disappear because it knows I did a full social security number. Birth date, some of these are kind of the same way. The way these work here though is you have some of these will say like full date of birth reported, so that's if we know their birth date. we will change it to that. And as far as putting dates in, you can either just type them in like this. It'll auto calculate their age. You can use dashes when you type it in, either way. You can also pull up the little calendar icon, which lets you select different months, different years. If you hold down the mouse, it'll pull up the months here, and then you can go ahead and click on the right one. And then you can see here it automatically defaulted to full date of birth reported. If, for instance, you did not have the full date of birth, maybe you just know the year they were born, then you would type the date in here, such as 1/1, and you could do approximate to let the system know that all we know is the approximate date. This isn't their actual. And then you'll also see fields such as client doesn't know. If a client says they don't know that information, client refused, if a client just says, they don't want to share that information. And then finally, data not collected. Data not collected would be the one you really don't want to use. That would mean that information, you just did not capture that information for whatever reason. And so we really want to, not ever have to use that. But however, if for whatever reason that information was not captured, when you initially enrolled that client or when you got that information from them, then that field is there to be able to be used. We'll go ahead and continue. Ethnicity. Also throughout Client Track, you'll notice these little help icons. If you hover over those have some helpful tidbits of information. Disabling condition, for instance, if I hover over that one, it's actually got some stuff straight from the HUD Data Standards Manual. So this can be some great reminders if you are, saying, what does HUD mean when they say disabling condition? You can find that information there. Continuing on with race, this is a multiple select box, so you can actually select however many races are appropriate for that client. We'll go ahead and continue here. We'll note here sexual orientation for this particular enrollment is not required, so we can skip that. If we would like to record the address, contact information for the client, we can do that. It's not required for this particular enrollment, but if we put a check mark by there, we can see that now we can type in an address, email, home phone, and so forth. Now, something to note throughout this intake, based on what project we are enrolling somebody to, is going to determine the particular questions that come up and also what questions are required. So that's just something to note, that while you're doing the intake, if you are noticing there are things that are being required that for a fact are not required for your project type, then you need to either get with a COC admin or submit an issue in Client Track so we can look at your project setup. And that also goes for if you do an intake on somebody and you notice it's not asking all the questions that for a fact are required. Again, that could point to your project might not be set up right. And so you want to submit an issue on that so we can get that corrected. So continuing on here, this last step here, we can actually leave this family totally blank, and then relationship head of household would be self, because when doing a intake, we always want to start with the head of household. So that's something to consider if you're doing a family. Always start with whoever is considered the head of household, and that's what this represents here, that they are they are the head of household. So at this point, we'd go ahead and click finish. And what's happened here, and you can also follow this throughout the steps right here, and this is basically, so this is what's called in Client Track a workflow, and what this is doing is, instead of us going and doing individual steps and then having to go click and figure out where we need to go next, this is going to walk us through this workflow, and it's automatically going to capture all the information we need a step at a time. And what we've done at this point is we've already created that client record. So here you can see this client record exists in the system now. It has a client ID right here. This is an individual number that every client is assigned. And even if we did not do anything else here, this client record would exist in the system. Now, we haven't enrolled them into our project, so they're not really associated with us or our agency, but they do exist in the system. In this step here, family members, this is where we would add any family members that the client might have. Something to note on this form is, one, if this was a record that already existed within the system, they might have family members connected here that we might not be particularly enrolling into our project. So maybe somebody had their entire family that was enrolled into a family shelter a couple years ago, and so when we get to this screen, we see, the head of household along with a bunch of other family members. But maybe now we're just working with that particular head of household. Maybe we're just a individual emergency shelter. It's totally fine that multiple family members are listed here, because on the next form you're going to see you actually have an opportunity to choose which clients you are actually enrolling. So that being said, here on this form here, if you see a bunch of people and you're like, oh, well, we're not enrolling all of them, do I need to delete them, or what do I need to do? It's totally fine to leave them on here. Like I said, the next screen is going to allow you to choose which ones you are actually enrolling. But we do want to make sure on this screen that any family members we are enrolling together, and this does mean someone that they are going to be residing with now. So if someone has a family that maybe they're not with right now and they're just coming into our project by themselves, we don't have to go in and make sure to add them. We can just add the ones that we are going to be working with here. And so for training purposes, I'll go ahead and add a family member just so we can see what that looks like. So I'm going to type in the first name, last name. When I go to another field here, it's going to automatically do a little pop-up box, which is what it's doing is it's searching this client name that I just keyed in to see if maybe they already exist in the system. So maybe they've been tied to another family at some point or something like that. Based on social security number and birth date, you would be able to quickly see if this person already exists or not. And if they don't, you would go ahead and click cancel, and it's going to allow us then to continue on creating a new client file for this person. And then we would go ahead and type in the same information that we did for this head of household. Actually, I'll make this person a child. And then based on if a person is adult or child will also dictate what questions are asked. So we'll see that in just a moment. We'll go ahead and type in information here. We'll actually see, okay, so relationship head of household, here's where we will key in that. Disabling condition. You'll actually note there's not a veteran status for this because it knows the person is under 18. And then it does default race to the head of household's race. However, we can go ahead and change that. So if that would be different, we can click here and then select the appropriate ones. Click the little check box here, and then that would allow us to change that. Also, if you get on this screen, it's a pre-existing client, you might run into an issue where everyone's listed as head of household. That was just an issue with some of the migrated clients. What you'd want to do here is actually, if that's the case, if you have multiple clients listed here and they all say self, you would actually change them all to something that is not self. You'd click save, and then you would go ahead and change the appropriate one to self. And then this would allow you to go ahead and click save and close, which will let us continue in our process. So this page is where we actually enroll the clients into the program. So here you'll see a list of any programs that you have associated with your project. So I'm going to go ahead and choose one here. And here's where you're going to see any of those family members listed. And all you do is put a check mark by the ones that you want to enroll. So again, if you see a whole list here, and some of those people are not people you're going to be working with, don't put a check mark by them, just put a check mark by the ones that you are enrolling. Project date here, we want to make sure this is the actual date that you are enrolling them into your project. So if you maybe recorded things on paper a week ago, but now you're keying it into the system, then we'd want to make sure to backdate this to the proper date. It's automatically going to put you as a case manager. However, if you need to, you can click these magnifying glasses to change this. If maybe you're doing the intake, but someone else is actually going to be the case manager. And then here it also gives you another opportunity to record the relationship to head of household. And so the reason why that's important is on each project intake, it's going to, after selecting program, it's going to ask this. And so if someone previously recorded this family and there was maybe a different person that was head of household, here it's still going to allow you to record what this situation is for your project. So maybe you have two different emergency shelters, for instance. One is one that just does women and children, one just does men. When you do the project intake here and we say we're enrolling just the man by himself, then we just enroll him, mark him as self. Then later on, when we go to do a whole nother intake on the woman and children, then we would just select the woman and the children here, and then we would actually select her as self. And so this gives you flexibility of having kind of different makeups of each family makeups of per project level. Also, you'll notice restrictions listed here throughout ClientTrack. Depending on if your agency is considered protected or not, and that's something that's kind of set up in the back end, it's going to either default to restrict to organization or restrict to MOU, which restrict to MOU is going to mean it's potentially shared that other agencies would be able to see that information. Also, you'll note here, date of move-in date, that's not required here because of this project type. This would be something if it's rapid rehousing, or in the future, all permanent housing projects will have dates here. And so you'll note that one is going to be when the person enrolls into the project, and then one's going to be when they actually get housed. And we're going to go ahead and click Save here. At this point, this goes ahead and creates the client record. Actually creates the enrollment for the client record. Now, an error you might run into on this program enrollment page is if this person was already enrolled into another residential project, you might get a little error message here that says this person's already enrolled in, and it would list the name of the project and the agency there. ClientTrack will not let you enroll someone into two residential projects at the same time because it's impossible for someone to, actually be staying at two different places. And so if you ever get a message like that, you would want to contact that agency that they are still enrolled at, because obviously they need to go in and exit that person from that enrollment. If they are no longer there, then that would allow you to go ahead and enroll them into your residential project. If you ever have a hard time getting in touch with a agency for them to correct that information, you can also always submit an issue on that, and then we can figure out getting in touch with them and making that work. So we're going to go ahead and continue on here. This is where we get into the assessment questions, and it's going to ask all those individual questions and kind of associate them though with that enrollment. So here, the first question that's not filled out, housing status, is not required, so we don't have to do that. Client location here, this is not where the client used to live or anything like that. This is where you are servicing this client. And so the purpose of this question would be for projects that serve more than one COC, have different locations. You'd be able to select the appropriate location here. Type of residence, this is all where the client stayed the night before, so we'd want to go ahead and do that information here. Based on what you answer here is going to depend on these following questions. So if I do emergency shelter versus institutional, it's going to change up things a little bit here, and so we just want to go through this in order. For instance, under type of residence here, if I do nursing home, it's going to say, well, did you stay less than 90 days? If I choose yes, it's going to then go ahead and say, well, exactly how long did you stay? And then it's going to say on the night before, so this is talking about the night before they were at the nursing home, were they in fact on the streets or emergency shelter or safe haven? And then you would choose yes or no. If you choose no, that's going to be the end of that. If you choose yes, then it's going to pop up, well, what is the approximate date homelessness started? And also follow-up questions of, well, regardless of where they stayed, how many times have they been homeless in the last 3 years, and so forth. And so these can be some kind of hard to answer questions. This is really where you get into a conversation with the client and trying to get the most appropriate answers for this. And so very important information. This is also where it's calculated if someone is chronically homeless or not. So again, we want to make sure that we capture the most appropriate, accurate information here if possible. Realizing though that some of this is going to be approximate because, you know, a lot of people aren't going to know exactly the day that they became homeless. Also, something to note, throughout ClientTrack, if there is information you do not record that's required, it will not let you continue on. So if I hit save, you'll see here there's some information that I did not capture, and if I actually click on there, it will take me directly to that. If I was hovered up here, for instance, if I click here, it's going to hover down here and let me know where I need to record this information. Health insurance, yes or no. If I choose yes, then it's going to make me go ahead and choose one of these particular ones to be yes. If I choose no, it changes them all to no. So we want to just make sure we are asking the client if they're getting any of these for health insurances. Go ahead and save here. And as we do this again, we are seeing all the different steps laid out here through the workflow. If we're in the middle of a workflow and we need to, maybe we need to pull up a different client for whatever reason, or maybe we're going to lunch, we're not going to be able to continue this, you can actually pause workflows. If we hit pause here, it's going to pause the workflow. You'll get a little thing here that says OK, and it takes you out of that workflow. To resume that workflow later on, you can just click paused workflows. It'll give you a list of any paused workflows you have. Click the little blue arrow beside it and hit resume. Now this information, even if we were to cancel the workflow, this is, as we're going through these steps, it is going to save all the information as we go. And so there's not going to be anything that gets deleted, if we cancel the workflow. But however, to make sure we get all this information recorded, we want to continue all the way through the workflow, and that's going to make sure we don't miss anything. So for barriers, HUD requires that every barrier have at least a yes or no for all these. The quickest way to do this screen is if you click this box, it'll mark them all as no, and then you can mark the appropriate ones as yes. If you choose yes, it'll also require you to record this information here. You got a little explanation thing here. This is not required, but some people will use this to do a little clarification of maybe exactly what is this chronic health condition that this person is recording. This is something that will always be default to restrict to organization, so this is something that will not be shared with other agencies. Continuing on, domestic violence, and then continuing on for income. So there's going to be two required questions here: income from any source or non-cash benefits from any source. If we just choose no here, we'd be able to do save and close. If we choose yes here, it's actually then going to automatically pop up those possible options. So I'm going to choose yes here on both of these. Expenses is not required, so you'll see no asterisk here. And then you will note you have all your different options here for income and also all your different options for non-cash. It will make you select at least one of these because we chose yes on here. And then it will also make you for any of these up here, because these will have a dollar amount, you will want ahead and put a dollar amount here. For earned income, it's a good idea to go ahead and type in the description of where this person is working, how they're getting that money. And then for these, you can just type in the value. There's not really anything in the description necessarily you'd want to record here. And then these are the non-cash benefits. And you do want to make sure you are, when you're doing an intake, you're asking each client if they are receiving any of these benefits. You don't want to just say, well, do you get any non-cash benefits? They might not think of food stamps as non-cash benefits. So you want to kind of go through these one at a time, just asking if the client gets any of these. Once we record that, we will go ahead and click save and close. And we actually see finish here. So I always tell people, if you can get to the finish, if you see finish and can click on that, you can pretty much guarantee yourself that you have answered all the questions and gone through all the assessment questions that you needed to. You can also back into things by clicking on the things here. This is how you go back if you needed to. Say you had done assessment and then realized, oh, I did that wrong. You can navigate back through here. Is how you do that. And then also, if we had enrolled both family members, then this stage here, instead of getting finished, we would automatically switch over to the other family member, and you'd see this information change here, and then it would walk you through capturing any information for those family members. And again, based on the age and whether they're head of household or not, it's going to only ask you the questions that are required for that particular client, saving you a lot of time by not having to type in information that you don't have to. Once you click finish, it goes ahead and takes you to the client dashboard. And here we can see we have an enrollment for our client, for our agency that we were logged into. We can see that they have an enroll date here. And then we can also see there is one case member. So this would give you a heads up if you had meant to enroll the entire family, but you only see one case member here, that there's a problem. So that is an intake in a nutshell. Hopefully that filled you in on doing an intake. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to submit a ticket by clicking up help on the top right here.
In this video, I'll be going over how to record services in ClientTrack. Services are those individual things that you offer a client and record into ClientTrack, different than the initial enrollment that you do when you first see a client and enroll them into your program. So you will always need to do an enrollment first, and then services, again, are those ongoing things that you offer a client while they are enrolled into your project. There's actually several different forms within ClientTrack that allow you to record services. However, regardless of what form you use to record the service in, it will all end up in the same place. And so what I mean by that is on the client's dashboard, for instance, here you'll see the client's name and then services. This always is going to list the most recent services that the client has received. It doesn't matter which form you use to record those services on, it's going to show up here. You can also click on services here with this menu option, and it will show you a list of services as well, and also give you option to delete any services that you've recorded, as well as also edit services that you've recorded here. So the most basic way to add services is the Add New button. And so this, again, just click Services and Add New. And we'll go through this quickly. The first thing is going to require you to go ahead and choose the enrollment that you're recording the service for. So again, if the client does not have an enrollment, you're not going to be able to record a service. So we want to go ahead and choose the appropriate enrollment here. The grant option here is more for sorting purposes, and so based on what grant I choose, it will then show me a list of services that have been matched up to that grant. So for instance, on this grant, and this is training, so it's going to look different, or you'll have different options in production. But for this grant, you see there's two different services that we have options to record. These are the categories listed here in the bold. So these are the actual two services. If I choose a different grant, though, you'll see a different list, a larger list of services. So this just allows you to kind of pare down so you don't see this ginormous list of available services. Once we find the service we want to record, we go ahead and select that. This date here, we want to make sure whatever date we have here is the date that the client is actually receiving this service. You can also click the little calendar icon and change that if it was a different date. Units is how many of this particular service the client is getting, and unit value is the value of that particular service. So for instance, if I was going to say let's say we paid 2 months rent for a client, we could record that as 2 units with a value of, say the rent was $500, and then it'll automatically calculate that as 1,000. So this way it gives you a good way of recording what you've actually provided for the client. It automatically is going to fill in your name as the one that's performing the service. There is a little comment box here, so you can add a comment if that'd be helpful for whatever service you're recording. And then also it's going to have the default restrictions down here. If you are a restricted agency, this is going to default to restrict to organization. If not, it'll stay here for restrict to MOU. And then we would just click Save. And as we can see, now this service is listed here. So as you can see, services is something that's very quick to add versus an enrollment where you're doing all of the assessment questions and all of that. Services is very quick. Another way to record services that can be very helpful, especially if you are recording multiple services for one client on the same day, is the quick service option. To get to quick services, you can either hover over services and then go to quick services, or from the standard services screen that we're on now, you can click on quick services here. Either way, it's going to take you to the same form. First off, we'll have a date. So this is, of course, the date that the client is receiving the service. We'll go ahead and choose the enrollment. Again, choosing the grant is going to filter what services we have available to us. And then you'll actually get a screen where you can actually just check the services that this client is getting on this day. So in this way, if you are providing multiple services to a client, this form is going to help you do this in a much more proficient way than doing the standard services screen. Once we set that, we can go ahead and do save and close. And now you'll note we've just given all 4 of those services to that client. So again, very easy way to record multiple services for one client. Another option is under case notes. If you add case notes to a client, you'll notice at the bottom of that there is an area where you can actually add services as well. And so I'm just going to go ahead and do a test case note. Then here at the bottom, again, you're going to select the enrollment, select the grant, select the service. Over here, if you do need to change the unit value or units, you can change those options over here. And then if you were to click save, it will save that case note and then also save that service. So if we go, even though we recorded that service under case notes, if we go to service, we'll see it listed here as well. So again, regardless of where you're recording the service at, what form you're using, it's all going to be recorded under services. So there's no need to go record it under one form and then go record it under another form. Final way of recording services is actually found on the Home tab. So this is kind of, out of the different ways of recording services, this is going to be kind of the most different, and this is called Quick Services Multiple Clients. So again, you want to make sure you are on the Home tab. We want to click Quick Services Multiple Clients. This form is going to be beneficial if you are recording the same service for multiple clients. So, for instance, we're going to go ahead and choose a grant here to get our list of services. We're going to say we gave a case management service yesterday. And what this form will allow you to do is actually select multiple clients to record this one service on this date for. So there's a couple options of selecting clients. One, I can pull up this screen right here with the magnifying glass and I can start typing in my clients' names, selecting them, and then I will still have to select enrollment. And I can keep going down this list, adding all of the different clients that receive this service, build this list up. As you continue on, it's going to keep adding lines, so you can do as many clients as you want. And then once you have those in there, you would just hit save and close, and it's automatically going to then record all those services for those individual clients. Another option you have that could be useful is this option at the bottom here where it says only show clients enrolled in, and then you can select your project. So if we do this, it might do, depending on what web browser, you might get a pop-up, do you want to refresh the search results? I'm going to click OK. Then it's going to give me a list of all the clients that are currently enrolled in this project, and then give me the option of checking them, putting a check mark by their name to go ahead and assign this service to. So this is great if you have a project that doesn't have a huge amount of currently enrolled clients and there's a service that you commonly record for them each day. Maybe you have an emergency shelter and you give them a meal every day. You could easily select that emergency shelter program. You'll see a list of all your currently enrolled clients. Select the meal service, and then put a check mark by each of those people that got one. Hit save and close. Again, this is a great time saver tool to record services when you have a lot of different people receiving the same service. And again, even if we're recording services on this screen, if we go to pull up the client, we're going to see that service listed under here. And then also, if we ever need to edit a service, we click the little notebook beside the service. That's going to give you option to change the date, change the unit value, also read the comments if we had saved any comment on it. And if we've ever recorded services we didn't need to, you can use the delete button here to delete those. If we've deleted a service and we need to restore it, you can actually go to the recycle bin up here. You'll see any services that have been deleted. You can click on this icon to restore it, Then we'll want to exit the recycle bin, and then we'll see that listed here. So that is services in a nutshell. As always, if you have any questions, please submit a ticket using the help icon up here so that we can reach out and help you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, we're going to cover entry of referrals into the system. So all referrals are going to be logged in the client's workspace. And to open up the main form for referrals, I'm just going to click referrals here on the left, click add new. I want to make sure to attach it to my enrollment. I can change the date the referral is provided here. And I want to choose the referral I'm making. This list will show me all the referrals I have access to, so I know that this is for a path one. I want to pay attention to the prefix that I'm choosing a path referral. We just have generic providers set up, so I'm clicking the spyglass and choosing the generic provider, path provider for now. If I have an outcome, so I want to mark that something is attained, so I know that this client attained the employment assistance, I'm marking the result as service provided. Once I'm done, I click finish, and I can see all the referrals that were logged on this screen here. For path, this is specifically looking at the report is looking just at the number of clients who received a certain type of referral. So I can make as many community mental health referrals as I want, and on the report it's only going to come down as the one client, just the one client, this client that received the referral, as long as all the date criteria are met for being federally enrolled in the program. So once again, to log a referral, I'm on the client's workspace, I click referrals, I'm going to add new, and then logging through, be sure to choose the correct service from the correct referral service from the drop-down. And if I need to make any edits, I can go in and click that pencil and pad icon and make the change I need to here.
In this training video, I'll be going over how to record a during program enrollment assessment as well as an annual assessment. These two types of assessments can be very important as they allow you to record the potential changes that a client might experience as they have an enrollment in your project. And some projects require an annual assessment. And so that's an assessment that's done once a year for people that are in your project for a year or more. And if you submit an APR and you've ran HUD data quality reports, you might have run into missing information in relation to annual assessments. So we're going to look at this client here. This is a client that has an enrollment on 6/1/16, and we see the last assessment completed was 6/1/16, which would have been the initial assessment done on intake. And then looking at today's date, we know, well, it's been over a year since this client's been in the project, and for training purposes, we're going to say that this is a project that requires an annual assessment. To do that, we're going to click the blue action button beside the enrollment here. We're going to click on Update/Annual Assessment. Here it's going to give us an overview of the initial project entry date we used. We probably wouldn't ever want to change this, but it just lists it here as a reference. So I'm going to go ahead and click No Changes on this. And here it's going to ask us, do we want to do a new assessment or update an existing assessment? This is where some users can get confused, and so I'll explain the differences between these two. New assessment is what you're going to want to pick if in fact you are recording new information for this client. Even though we have done an initial assessment when the client first came into the project, this is a new assessment we are doing because this is a new date that we're recording information for them. The only reason you'd ever want to do update existing would be if you've already done an annual assessment or during program enrollment assessment and you recorded some information incorrectly and needed to go update that. So this is more for data quality cleaning. So for most of the time, you would just do new assessment. Next question here is during program enrollment or annual assessment. The differences between these two is during program enrollment is an assessment that can be done at any point after a client has enrollment in your project. So for instance, if a client was enrolled in your project a month ago and they did not have employment when they came into your project, so they were assessed as not having that, but now they do and you want to record it, well, you could do a during program enrollment assessment and it would capture that information. And then in a month from now, if maybe they got a raise and you want to record that as well, you'd be able to go do another program enrollment, and it's going to continue to track those changes that the client has. On the other hand, annual assessment is going to record that same information, but you're going to have to do it on within a certain time frame. So HUD says for projects that you have to do an annual assessment on, the annual assessment has to be either within 30 days before or 30 days after the client's anniversary into your project. So for this training, we're going to go ahead and click annual assessment and continue to record this. So something to note here, we said that you have a 30-day before or after the anniversary of the client's enrollment into your project. So we know this client was enrolled on 6/1/16. So going by that, we could do an assessment pretty much any day in June or pretty much any day in May, and it's going to fall within that total 60-day time frame. If we try to do an assessment outside of that, you're going to notice there's a warning up here, and it says the assessment date is outside of that 60-day window, and this may cause data quality and reporting errors. Now this is a warning, not an error, so a warning will allow you to continue. If I hit save here, I would be able to continue on. However, know that if you are trying to do an annual assessment for compliance reporting purposes, and you record one with the date range outside of that time window, it's probably not going to count for that. So we definitely want to make sure that this date is within the proper time frame. So I'm going to go correct that, and we'll choose the 13th, which is within 30 days of after the client's anniversary. Now once you do get the warning up top, it will stay there. So you notice even though I changed it to a different date, it still has this warning here. But just know that as long as you have changed it within the proper time frame, that you are still going to be good to go. And also another potential warning you might get on this screen is if for whatever reason there was already an annual assessment you've done for this client and you're trying to do another one, it will give you a warning for that as well. And here we get into where it asks follow-up assessment questions. Basically, these are same assessments that were done when you initially enrolled them, and it's going to ask these again so you can see if any of these have changed within that year's time. So something that will save a lot of time is using the default last buttons that you'll find throughout this workflow. If I click that, it's going to pull in the information that was already recorded when the client was initially enrolled, but it gives you an opportunity to change this if in fact this information has changed. So if they did have health insurance now, I would change this. I want to go ahead and click save there, continue on. The next screen is going to be barriers. This would automatically pull in the barriers from the last time you assessed them. If this is changed, you would go ahead and make those changes here. Click save and close. Same way with domestic violence. Maybe this experience occurred, maybe it would probably be a later, longer ago now. We'll go ahead and save that. And then finally, income. And we'll use that default last assessment button as well. Here you can see we had recorded them as having earned income $550. Maybe they get $575 now, which would be an increase, and that's going to show that your project is helping people improve their income. And then also, if there's any other sources here that they get now, you would want to record that as well. And go ahead and click Save and Close, and you should see Finish. And once you click Finish, you can pretty much guarantee yourself that you have answered all those questions and not missed anything. And here we can see that the enroll date 6/1/16, but now the last assessment completed is 6/13/17. So we know that we did complete that annual assessment there. And now if we went to update annual assessment, when we get to this stage, if we went to update existing, it would show any annual assessments we've already done, such as the one we just completed, and that would allow you to edit it. But again, the only reason you want to do that is if some of that information was recorded incorrectly. So that is annual assessments and during program enrollment assessments. If you have any other questions or run into any hangups, as always, click the help icon up here and submit an issue on it. In this training video, we'll be going over how to do an exit workflow on a client. This is the way that you would exit a client from your project once they are no longer in it. So the first thing you'd want to do would be to pull up your client. You can either use the Find Client option here in the top left. You could search their name here in the global search bar. Or if you're on the Home tab, you could actually look at your current enrollments, select the project from here, and then select the client by clicking on that icon. So regardless of how you get to it, once you have your client pulled up, you'll see a blue action button beside the particular enrollment that we're wanting to do the exit on. We want to click on that, and then we want to hit exit the enrollment. Somewhere where people get confused is there is an option to delete enrollment. You would never want to delete the enrollment unless that client was never enrolled in that project, and so they were just enrolled incorrectly. That's the only reason why that option's there. So for the majority of the time, exit the enrollment is the option that you would want to choose here. So the first question here is going to say what's the exit date. So if this is the actual date they exited, it will default to today. Then you're good to leave that. If not, maybe they exited a few days ago and you're just now getting around to keying it into the system, then you can go ahead and choose that date here by clicking on that calendar icon. Next question is going to be destination. I definitely recommend that you get familiar with these different destinations, as some of them are closely related, but they are different. And so as you get more familiar with it, you will be able to record the most accurate destination for your client. So something I will just point out here, staying or living with family temporary and staying or living with friends temporary is one option, or is two options you have here. If you scroll down, there's also staying or living with family or friends permanent. So those are two totally different destinations. One is just temporary, one is permanent. There is other options as well, deceased, if someone passed away while in your project, and then a lot of other different options. So again, get familiar with these so that you can record what's most accurate here. Also, a unique option on here is no exit interview complete. This is a little different than all the rest of them. If you select this option, there will actually not be any further assessment questions asked through this workflow. Reason being, if you choose this, this would be the option if a client has just disappeared and you do not know any of the information on them as they are leaving. So again, once you choose that and we hit save, this would go ahead and in the exit assessment or exit workflow, there wouldn't be any assessment questions following. So for training purposes, we are going to go ahead and choose a particular location that they are going to so that we can see the full workflow of exiting a client. Next question here, for this particular project, it's not required that we include an exit reason, but you can record the exit reason here if you would like. So we're going to say this client completed the program. End case assignment, if that's left checked like that, that just goes ahead and ends the case assignment for whatever case manager this client was assigned to. If you uncheck this, it's not going to not exit them. They will still get exited. They would just still be assigned to a particular case manager. We'll go ahead and click save on this. At this point, the client would show exited from the system. However, there are some exit assessments we need to do so that we don't have missing data. And so you want to continue through this workflow and answer those questions. So the first one here is going to be the health insurance question. Now, something that will save you some time while doing an exit is you have this default last insurance status, and this is a button that you will see on several of the forms as we exit people. What this will do is bring in the answers from the previous time we assessed this client, whether that was the intake or maybe an annual assessment. But then it will give you an opportunity to change that. So for instance, if we said, well, now they do have health insurance, we would go ahead and choose yes and choose which one that is. And then that would be a positive for your project because you'd be able to say see that they came in without health insurance, and now as they are leaving, they do have health insurance. So we'll go ahead and click save on that. This will bring up the barriers page. It's automatically going to pull in what particular barriers you had selected on the last assessment. So here's where we would be able to modify this. And again, we're not actually modifying or editing the original intake assessment that we completed. This is just doing a separate assessment that's just tied to the exit so that we can see the difference between the two. We can go ahead and do save and close on that. And then income is going to be the same way. Using the default last assessment button is going to save you a lot of time by filling in this information. But again, we don't want to just do default last assessment and go save and close without looking over this information and then verifying with the client that this information is still accurate. So for instance, if maybe they have a job now, we would be able to go ahead and record that here as well. Make sure they're still getting these benefits for these same amounts. You can update the amounts. Maybe they're getting more here. And then we go ahead and do save and close when that's accurate. Now, because this was a family, so there were more than one person enrolled in this project, it's now going to ask if we also want to exit the other family member. So what this does is this gives you an option if maybe you have an enrollment where one person is exiting the project but another is staying, you could leave that other person still in the project. For training purposes, we will go ahead and we'll say no, that we're going to leave this other person in the project. And we will click finish. And once you get to the finish, you can pretty much guarantee yourself that you have answered all the exit assessment questions. You haven't skipped any. It'll take you back to the dashboard. Here we can see that for our client here, Catherine, they do have an exit date, so they are indeed exited. Also, a couple helpful tips here. If you exited somebody by accident and needed to get rid of that, if you were to click the blue action button beside their enrollment and click re-enter the enrollment, as long as it's been within the last 90 days that they've been exited, you can do that and it will just get rid of the exit. So it's like they never exited before. So something to know about there. Also, if you need to update the exit information, maybe you chose the wrong date for the exit, maybe you chose the wrong destination, the way you update the exit is just go back to exit the enrollment even though they've already been exited, and then it will give you an opportunity to modify that information. Hit save. and then it would continue to walk through the workflow. At this point, because we've already made the change we need to, it would be safe to cancel the workflow. Also, I forgot to mention while doing the exit, because it is a standard workflow, just like when we do an intake, there is a pause button there. So at any point while you're doing an exit, you can pause the workflow if you need to go pull up a different client, or you're heading out for the day and you're not going to be able to finish it. And then once it's paused, you can go to pause workflows and then resume that. So that is how to exit a client. Hopefully it has been informational and has made sense. As always, if you have any issues, click the help icon, submit a ticket.
Hi everyone. In this section, we'll be going through different privacy options. So clients have several options to choose from, if or when they decide to share. We'll go through the functional use cases as well as some examples in the system. First, let's recap on some basic concepts. When you sign into the system, you're always signed in under an organization. Sometimes this is referred to as agency or security organization. We're talking about the same thing. You can tell what organization you're logged in under by hovering over your name on the top right. That first row there says I am signed in under my training organization. And whenever we mark something as restrict to org, we're talking about restricting data so that just those logged in as the agency who created it can see it. So, and when we talk about sharing something to MOU, we're talking about sharing to organizations that are part of the MOU. And currently in Georgia HMIS, we just have the single share to all MOU. Second, when you're signed in, you are signed in with your specific account with its own user ID. The system will always display data that you entered. So for those of you who enter data under multiple organizations, this is something you'll have to keep in mind as you're switching back and forth between them. Now there's a difference between transactional data like enrollments or services and the client record itself, so being able to search for them and navigate to the client record. The client record restriction, so being able to search for it, being able to open up other transactions, is under Edit Client and Information Release. We'll go there in just a second. Again, this controls the ability for other people to search, to prevent duplicate records, to use the same record, as well as act as one of the main gatekeepers of being able to open up and see other transactional data that's shared to the MOU. Now for the transaction restrictions, meaning enrollment services, it's anywhere you see this plugin where it's a restrict to org or restrict to MOU on an individual service or assessment or enrollment. You are setting the restriction again just for that specific piece of data. So for this service, it's marked restrict to org. Only those who are logged in as my training organization, regardless of the client sharing information on the client record MOU, will be seen. Also, as a reminder, case notes, barriers, and all transactions from protected agencies are defaulted as strict to org and are not shared. For some of the different use cases that are coming in for the client record, so for existing clients, say they're already entered in the system, the typical use case for one is I am coming into the agency. That's fine if people know that I exist, they can search for me, but I don't really want to open up any transaction information, where I'm enrolled or where I'm being served. So for that, we just keep something at share and take globally. We mark save. So now if someone wants to search for this client, they'll be able to see it, but they would only be able to view the data that was logged either by yourself, so I logged all of these services, or logged under that particular organization. Next is if we are opening up the client record, so meaning client comes in and says, yes, you can share my information, that's fine. We're marking that as share and take to the MOU. inputting the name of the information release, or the number of the information release, I'm sorry, and that's going to be 1 for us. That's the only one we have to worry about. So we click save. Now if we were to search, that's opened up. Everything that's marked as restrict to MOU for services, other people can see. But again, anything that's marked restrict to org is separate from that. It'll still be protected. So if there are clients who say that in general, I don't mind sharing, but there's just one piece of information I don't want to share. So for example, if the client says I don't want anyone to know that I don't want to share that I'm receiving assistance for VA benefits for healthcare. For each specific service or assessment or enrollment, you can mark just that piece of information as restrict to org. So this is the restriction for some data, and you'll just have to mark that appropriately. As well, if they want to open things up later, so not necessarily for protected organizations, but if they're in services and it's, I don't really mind if people see, my past data, you can open these up to restrict to MOU. So notice that there's no share global for services. So it's basically you're sharing to the MOU, or you're just restricting it to the organization. If you have a brand new client that comes in and they want 0 sharing whatsoever, you have to, on clicking project intake, add a new client. You'll have to create what looks like a duplicate record. My mash keys here. I'll short circuit the workflow here a little bit. You have to create the additional client record, because that's the only way you know that you created the record. If it's already in the system, someone else likely created it. So we did the intake, we did add a new client, and now I'm marking that as restrict to organization. So this means that just persons logged in under this organization, or obviously your own user account, will be able to search for this client record and will be able to use this client record. Last, if a client refuses to consent to participate in research, for that we're going to use this document check feature. We're going to add a new document check, and the checklist we're looking for is opts out of research, and there is really only one option currently right now. So you can just mark it in the document check. You can also upload the file if it's scanned in. So by just saying that this person opts out of research, this is telling the system, this is telling everyone in the future who's looking at it, this client does not consent to be included in any type of research. So to recap what we covered, we looked at several different sharing scenarios, just some key reminders. If someone wants to share demographics only, that is share global on the information release. That's this option here. If someone wants to share information to the MOU, that's marking as sharing to the MOU and putting in that the appropriate information release. If it's someone who doesn't want to have any sharing at all, not even searching, you are creating that new client record when you do a project intake, and you're marking that record as restrict to org. You have to write down the client ID so you can go back to it later and know you're using the right one. And then lastly, for any type of transactions, sharing to some would mean that you're marking these particular assessments or transactions as restrict to org. And everything from protected agencies is defaulted, so you don't have to worry about it. Same thing with case notes, barriers, that type of sensitive information is automatically restrict to org.
In this training video, I'll be going over how issue management works in ClientTrack. Issue management is how you are able to submit an issue ticket when you're having trouble with the system or have a question, and then an admin will get a notification that an issue has been submitted, and we are able to work on those issues for you. So a cool thing about Client Track is regardless of what tab you're on, what page you're on, what form you have pulled up, you can submit an issue straight from there. And when you do that, the system will automatically record specific information regarding what form you happen to be on and what client you have pulled up and so forth that will actually help us diagnose the issue you're having. So for instance here, I'm going to actually kind of create an issue by not answering this question and trying to hit save. I get an error message here, and let's say I was unfamiliar with this error message or I did not know what to do now to correct this. Well, you can go up here to the top right and you'll see a help icon. Go ahead and click on that. These top three options here will help you submit a ticket. The first one is for if you're actually having just an issue. So there's something going on, you're getting an error message, there's a problem in the system. The second one is ask a question. Maybe you just need to know, hey, what's a good report for me to pull some data on services? And then third, make a suggestion. Maybe you just have a suggestion that would be good for a future update of Client Track. Regardless of what three of these you choose, they all go through issue tracking and we all get a notification to let us know that there's something that's been submitted, and we will go in and then look at it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on report an issue. Now the first thing here is the summary. We do want to be pretty detailed on the summary. This will help us as admins help solve your problem and know what's going on right off the bat, and it's also going to help you organize issues that you have previously submitted. So you don't want to just do a one-word summary. You don't want to just say APR not working. You want to give a little detail. So for this issue, I will say getting an error message. And then here you want to go ahead and go into a little bit more detail on exactly what's going on. And I would definitely tell you the more details you can get to us, the better. A lot of times we'll get an issue ticket and it will have very limited amount of information on what the actual problem is, and so then what we have to do is we have to send a reply back to you asking for more information, and you have to wait, for us to send that back, and then we have to wait for you to reply back to that, and it just takes it a lot longer for us to resolve your problem. So the more information you can provide, the better. If you take a little time on this step, it will probably end up helping you to get this issue resolved quicker. If you see this option here, you can attach a file or screenshot. If there's a file that would be helpful for this issue, you can do that through here by choosing a file and then selecting a file. That could be maybe a report you've already ran. It could be maybe Excel sheet or something like that. You can also attach a screenshot if you'd saved a copy of a screenshot. Speaking of screenshots, if you're not familiar how those work, on your keyboard there is a button in the top right that should say print screen. If you click print screen, and I'm going to go ahead and click print screen now, and then if you right click within this box here, you can hit paste and it will actually paste that screenshot. So you can basically just take a snapshot of your screen, and that would be helpful if you're maybe getting a specific error message or seeing something unusual on your screen and not sure what that means. You can take a screenshot of it and then still go ahead and type a description here though to kind of help us understand what the problem is. So once you have that information there, you can go ahead and scroll down. Now, view debug information, this would probably not be anything that you need to go in and click on, but I will show you what it contains. And this is why I was saying it's so important that you submit the issue directly from the page that you're having a problem with. Through this, we're going to be able to know what client you were working with, what agency you were logged into at the time, what form you were on, and then there's a good bit of more information here. And so that's going to be really helpful for us as admins to help troubleshoot your problem. And now I've been covering what you should include on issues, and for a moment I want to talk about what you should not include when you submit an issue. So when you submit an issue, it does send an email notification out to us, and in that email notification we get information from the summary, and we also get information that you would type here. Now we would not see the screenshot through the email, but we would get whatever's typed out here. And why that's important is you do not want to include personal identifiable information on a client within this. And so what we would say here, for instance, say we had a specific client we're working with, you wouldn't use their name here, you would say client ID, having issue saving. Something like that. And then the same way here, if there's a particular client you're talking about, just use client ID. So we don't want to use names, birth dates, socials here. Continuing on, this information right here should automatically fill out with your email address and your phone number. If it doesn't, please fill that out. Also, please make sure this is updated, because this is how you will get notifications that we have in fact worked on your issue, we've assigned it to somebody, we have replied to it, and we're looking for a response for you. So you really want to make sure this email is correct. And then notify additional people. This would allow you to add another user to be notified that this issue has been submitted. That could be used in a way, maybe you have a director that you want to let them know that, hey, there was an issue, but you submitted a ticket, that's why you haven't ran this report that you were trying to get to them, that kind of thing. Once we have all this information filled out, we can go ahead and click submit, and then this will go ahead and submit the issue within ClientTrack, and then we will get notifications through email to let us know that there has been an issue submitted. Now, submitting an issue is kind of half of issue management. The other part is going to be, once an issue has already been submitted, how that issue is handled and responded to, and there might be a response needed from you as a user, or you might have something else to add after you've already submitted an issue. You might have another comment or something else that you figured out in the system in regards to that issue. So to pull up your previously submitted issues, you want to make sure you're on the Home tab, and then under My Client Track here, you will see an icon for My Submitted Issues. And when you click on My Submitted Issues, by default here you will get all the issues you've submitted except issues that have already been marked as closed. Now there's kind of 4 statuses that you will probably see while we're working on issues. One is not assigned. That means we have probably not began to look at this issue yet. The first thing we would do when we look at an issue is we go ahead and assign it, and so that will be assigned either to a system admin or a COC admin, depending on what's appropriate. So then you'll see your issues going to assigned, and that means we are actively working on it then. Then the next stage would be fixed, verify, needed. And so when we go in and we feel like we've made a fix for something, we go ahead and mark it as fixed, verify, needed. That gives you an opportunity to go in and verify it to make sure it is indeed fixed, and then you can go ahead and close it. So in a nutshell, those are kind of the different stages that issues can be in. To pull up an issue, you would click this little pencil icon. So for instance, this is the issue we just submitted. So if I click this pencil icon here, I would go ahead and see that whole ticket. That's the screenshot I included and the text I included here. And then you'd also see any notes that were left here by any admins. And so, like I said, when we leave notes, you will get an email notification to let you know that you need to go in and check your My Submitted Issues to see what the note is we left. And in the email you'll get, it will have the issue ID, so you can easily pull up the specific issue. Now, if you need to reply to a message we've left on a note, you can do that by clicking New Note. And you can leave your reply here. And then scroll down and hit Save the Note. You always want to leave Send Email checked. That is just going to send a notification to let everybody know, or to let us know as admins that you have replied to it as well. So this is kind of how we can have conversations within an issue and communicate, what's going on and if we need any more information. Now, eventually we are going to go in and mark this issue as fixed as we come up with a solution for it. So once we do that, and we'll say how we fixed it, or that we did fix it. Once we did that, then when you go under My Submitted Issues, you're going to see this status: fixed, verify, needed. This would mean you would want to just go in, read the note, if it's applicable, go in and make sure it is fixed, and then you could go ahead and click Verify Issue. And just click Verify again there, and then that's going to let us know like you went in and verified it, and now it's actually going to be marked as closed. So as you can see now, it doesn't even show up here. The way we'd get it to show up here is if we were to click Closed, it would now show Closed Issues. You can also go in and close an issue yourself. So if you submitted an issue and then the next day you figured that problem out, you can actually open up your issue and go to Close Issue, say why you fixed it, scroll down and click Save Note and Close Issue. That can be really important because if you submitted an issue but then didn't need any more help with it, when you go close it out, we're not going to look at it anymore, and that will save us a lot of time so we can work on issues that are current in the system. Also, if there was an issue you submitted previously, even if it was a while back and you're still having that problem, and maybe we had already marked it as fixed and you thought it was fixed but found out it's not, instead of submitting another issue, it would actually be better to go into that closed issue, that older closed issue, and you can actually go in, click this little icon up here, and you can say mark this issue as not fixed. And it's going to say what is still wrong. You would put the information there, scroll down, save the note, and mark the issue as not fixed. That's going to keep the system working a lot more efficiently instead of having multiple issues submitted on the same problem, and then it also will give us a good history of the problem, how it started, and some good information on that. So again, learning how this issue tracking works and learning how to submit good issue tickets will really make this system work great for you guys and also help us efficiently work on these problems.